Well, let's get started. Thanks everybody for coming. I was in watching the guest list populate all week. One thing that was really amazing is like I don't know everybody here, but the people I do know would be like my hand-picked group of people who get my CushionWorks email and would want to sign up for an event like that, a singular event like this. So it's really nice to see all of you here. Thanks for coming. For those I don't know, my name is Jordan Stein. I operate CushionWorks, which is an exhibition space in the Mission District in San Francisco. And to my amazement, realized just this week has been operational for almost 4 years. Yeah, I know, it's startling. We've been doing events and exhibitions for that long. We really miss doing events, but we're grateful to still have people over in the space by appointment. And we've hosted all sorts of artworks and histories, ideas in that space, and largely things that may have a difficult home for a variety of reasons elsewhere. And we've also done exhibitions about a number of social histories that sort of overlap with art, but really not the art, what we understand as the art world so much. And those are some of our most favorite exhibitions. I've known of Frank Moore and his work for some time, and was very lucky to connect with Keith Wilson, who is making a documentary film about Frank's life and work. Through him, connected a little bit more deeply with Mikee, LaBash, and Linda Mack. And we put together an exhibition. So this program tonight is in concert with a show in physical space in the Mission that's on view through March 6th called I Get Results, which was Frank's campaign slogan, Frank Moore for President 2008. It's a curious show because it's archival, but it's of the very recent past. So it's been an interesting exercise to try to sort of set in time and historicize something that really kind of wasn't all that long ago. So it feels very of the moment, but just slightly off in some way. There are all these great printouts of internet articles that mention Frank, and it just feels like the internet, even in 2008, was something so radically different. So it is kind of a strange walk back in time. Anyway, we thought we would take advantage of the fact that Linda and Mikee knew and worked with and celebrated and loved Frank Moore, and invite them to this Zoom conversation so that we could share their history and knowledge with you. And so I want to thank them for being here. I also want to thank Corey and Alexi and Erica, who were very central to Frank Moore's orbit and who facilitated the loan of the archival materials that are at CushionWorks. They're here, and so we want to thank and acknowledge them. We're just going to get sort of straight into it. I'm going to read their bios, and then we'll start the discussion. So the way that we'll do it is we'll sort of, in many ways, the exhibition at CushionWorks is sort of an invitation to take a deeper dive into the world of Frank Moore, and he was very polyphonic character and was incredibly prolific in a variety of media. And believe it or not, the big presidential bid was somewhat peripheral in his life and work. It's one of the things we'll talk about. And so we'll kind of zoom in and out of the presidential campaign, and then of course want to leave enough time for questions. So think of them as you have them, and then feel free to drop them into the chat, or just signal that you'd like to ask a question, and then we'd love to hear your voice directly asking it. Okay. So Linda Mack was Frank Moore's lover and partner in crime for almost 40 years. She's currently immersed in organizing Frank's archives and publishing his work. Linda's the co-producer of the documentary series Let Me Be Frank, and is the treasurer of Interrelations, the nonprofit church established by Frank in the late 1970s. Wow. Michael LaBash is a designer and artist who was in an intimate relationship with Frank Moore and Linda Mack for 25 years. He designs all the interrelations books and websites, is co-producer and editor of Let Me Be Frank, and serves on the board of Interrelations. I should also say that Frank Moore was in a way very lucky to find folks like Linda and Mikee, because they have such a meticulous approach to to the material that he created and are incredibly good organizers and archivists. So the whole archive is going to the Bancroft Library at the University of California, Berkeley. And some archives are a total mess and some are not. And so we thank them for that. Keith Wilson, my friend, is a filmmaker and artist based here in San Francisco, whose work has been exhibited at Sundance, the Berlinale, South by Southwest, the United States National Gallery of Art, Documenta 14, and MoMA in New York. He teaches in the film and media department at UC Berkeley and has an MFA in film production from the University of Texas, Austin. I can't tell who that is, but would you mind muting yourself? I hate muting people. It's such a.
I think it's Annie and Pat.
Okay.
Oh God, it is.
Sorry, Annie. Keith is working on a film about Frank's life and work. And then I've found that introducing Frank, it's a really interesting exercise to have people over to the space. The installation is sort of dramatic, and introducing people to Frank is a real challenge. He was a performance artist. He was a shaman. He was a poet. He was a director. He had television shows. He had radio stations. And so Keith and I thought that we'd begin today by asking Linda and Mikee, you know, when people ask you, who was Frank Moore, who passed in 2013, I should say, what do you say? How do you begin to answer that question?
Well, we run into that a lot here because almost everybody we meet doesn't know Frank, and so they don't know us as part of Frank. So we have to figure out a way to somehow communicate who Frank is to people like who see us and we look like normal people, you know, so they have no idea of like who we are. So I'll say something like, well, you know, I was with Frank for 40 years and then I'll just list all his stuff. I'll say, well, Frank was a writer, he was a poet, he was a painter, he had an internet radio show, he had a live show where he interviewed people, he was a singer, he had a band, he was a dancer. I would just go through a whole list. And then often I would forget to mention that Frank had cerebral palsy. And then at the end, I'd go, oh, yeah. And he had cerebral palsy. He was in a wheelchair. He had a board and a pointer. And it's like, for a lot of people, that just kind of goes by. They can't deal with that aspect of it. So they'll just pick something about Frank that interests them. And it depends on how deep. Like, we had a conversation with our mail guy who we have been just casually talking to since we moved here. And recently we had like a pretty deep conversation about Frank, because when you're talking with somebody, you know, you can tell how far they want to go and how far they can go. And I'm always shocked at what comes out of my mouth. Like, here I am talking to the mail guy and I'm talking to him about aeroplay, and like Frank's whole rap about aeroplay and the need that people have for physical play after the possibility of sex comes into their lives. And so people can't touch each other anymore. And I'm saying all this stuff and I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing? You know, am I free? But he was like so there. He totally understood. He totally understood about people needing to touch each other. And it seemed like it was something, you know, like when you talk to people, sometimes you have like a feeling like you've just gone into some deeper place. And that's what it felt like with him. So, you know, it just, you know, sometimes it's just like our neighbor across the street is like, what an interesting guy, you know, and she'll just kind of do that. And I'm still sending her stuff. And, you know, so I'll just say stuff and whatever clicks with somebody will go from there.
Okay. And just to clarify
clarify for people on the call, Linda and Mikey used to live with Frank in North Berkeley for decades, and in the last 2 or 3 years ago moved to Sacramento. So it's a somewhat of a different climate than North Berkeley in terms of interacting.
Yeah, and in Berkeley, we were, it was Frank, Linda, and Mikey. So everybody that we knew in Berkeley knew us as Frank, Linda, and Mikey. Here, we're just Linda and Mikey. We're just like normal looking people. And so, it's like that whole element is at play.
Just to give folks a quick sense, I'm going to share my screen here just for 1 second. When you log on to this site that Linda just mentioned, Aeroplay, which is kind of the main portal here for Frank's world, this is what you get. So you'll see Frank Moore for President way in the upper right-hand corner. And then there are all these other things, hot links, Shaman's Cave, radio stations, video series, clothing, workshops, classes, books, video archives, thousands and thousands of hours of video archives. And needless to say, I recommend this deep dive, and we'll kind of weave in and out of it today. And then, I'll also quickly show you this. This is Frank Moore for President in 2008. Not only were Frankie and Linda and the rest of the family really great at organizing and archiving, but they kept it all going, and they published a tremendous amount of work as they went. So this site is a great gateway to more information about Frank, with lots of pictures and videos and other kinds of things like that. Okay, Keith, do you think we should introduce folks to Frank at this point? Oh, we can't hear you, friend.
Next, we're going to show the platform video, right?
Sure, yeah.
So when you come, if you're able to come to the exhibitions, one of the key, for me, the kind of main thing from which everything else sort of suspends or hangs or is around, 24-minute total video, but it's basically a series of 9 commercials or web commercials or something that that Frank and Linda and Mikey and others made during the campaign. And I thought, so in the gallery it plays constantly, and what it is Frank's platform, read by Linda, and also so one of the things that's really interesting when you're in the space is that you're hearing Frank's positions. And Frank's positions in 2008, just to keep in mind that 2008 for me feels like a world away from now. There's things that he's talking about like universal basic income, which at least weren't on my radar, but in 2008, they're sort of a core part of his campaign. So Jordan, why don't we just play one of those? Again, there's 9 of them. And by the way, one of the things that I really respect and admire and aspire to, I guess, that Frank and Linda and Mikey and everybody sort of, is that they make everything available is online. So everything that's going to be in my film, everything that's in the show, everything, all the platform, but everything is available online for anyone to see and use. It's not behind a paywall. Everything is available and accessible. So why don't we show one of those platform videos, Jordan?
Okay, so I'm going to share the screen again. It's about a 3-minute video, and it's Frank's position on energy and climate change. And it's just, it's a way to meet him and sort of hear from him directly and have an immediate window into the kind of relationship and dynamic that he had in particular with Linda. So here we go.
Hi, I'm Linda Mack. Next to me is Frank Moore. He is running for president. Here is Frank's position on energy and climate change. Public mass transit will be free, 24/7, and reliable. I will call for a major rebuilding of America. We will repair our school buildings, and we will build needed new schools. I will encourage a society of small villages connected by mass transit. Within these small villages, people could walk or bike to work, to school, to shopping, to entertainment, etc. Mass transit will combine these small villages within 15 miles radius into dynamic communities. Living in these villages will end gridlock traffic, will cut greenhouse gases, will cut stress and isolation. Housing for all incomes will be included equally in each village. We will encourage electric cars, fast trains, clean, sustainable, decentralized energy generators. I would shut down all nuclear generators. The primary function of the government should be the protection of the health, the civil and human rights, the freedoms, and the general welfare of the people, instead of the protection and the promotion of corporate profits and interests. The government should exist to serve the people and not to make a profit on the services to the people. My administration will be governed by these basic principles. If this just makes sense to you, vote for Frank Moore for president by writing him in. For his full platform, go to www.frankmooreforpresident08.com. Together we can create a sane and humane society. This is the very P-O possible. If we, this is very possible if we want to do it. This is very possible if we want to do it. I want to do. I want to do it.
So there's immigration, there's one about taxes and debt, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe now is a good time, Linda and Mikee, for you to start talk about the origins of the campaign, like what started this? Is there something or?
Yeah, so in preparing for this, we uncovered on that huge website something that Frank had written, The History of Frank Moore for President 2008. And I just want to like read the one section because he says it so well. He said, Mikee LaBash had a Curly for President t-shirt from the Three Stooges. And for Christmas 2006, Mikee made me a Frank Moore for President t-shirt. Mikee's wearing it. When I wore it, people started asking me what my platform was. So I wrote a platform up. Somebody who read it, everybody who read it got excited, overflowed with hope, saying it expressed what they felt and wanted. They didn't see a performance artist in a wheelchair. They didn't check the odds of my winning. Instead, they saw someone who they could excitedly vote for, somebody who shared their dreams, who talked deeply about what really affects their lives. Their reactions placed on me a responsibility to mount a serious campaign, to commit and surrender to it, and to hang on no matter where this ride would go. I never know where a performance or a project will evolve. And that's like, you know, that like really captures Frank in that he always said he just follows, that he doesn't have a goal. And so this like dumb t-shirt we make him, people like ask him for his platform. He like sat down and typed that platform up, and like Frank never edited. he just types it and it's done. He never goes back and fixes anything or changes it. So he just came up with that, like, boom. And then he'd have me hold the printout, the computer pages. So when the next time somebody asked, I'd say, oh, well, here it is. And they could read it. And him responding to how seriously people took it was what motivated him to just, okay, I guess that's what we're doing now. And he didn't think, oh, it's keeping me away from this that I want to do or that what I want to do. He just like went with opportunities is the way he put it.
Wow. And because he was a performance artist, maybe above all things, it's important to note that he really saw this as a performance and
He said it was one of his best performances.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about why you suspect he thought that maybe it was one of his best. How do you suppose that he qualified, best and worsts and successfuls?
He actually said that it gave him an opportunity to talk about things. Like the things that were important to him, like about creating community, it gave him an opportunity to meet people, to talk about things. We ended up, we didn't have any money. So everything was from home. Yeah, he said, my running for president created an excitement for how possible it is to bring our dreams for our society into reality, to remove fear and isolation, to get the boot of big corporations off our neck, to provide everyone health care, lifelong education, a minimum income, and a livable wage, to restore our rights and freedoms, and to bring our troops home. We everyday people know the real state of the union, but more importantly, we have the sense of what is possible. We need leaders who share our dreams and who do not sell us short or sell us out. So he saw it as an opportunity to talk about all that stuff. We did parades, we did festivals, we did the How Berkeley Can You Be parade a couple times. We did a bunch of local festivals in San Francisco, El Cerrito, Berkeley, and just sat there and talked to people and met people, many of whom are still on Frank's performance list and get all the stuff we send out.
And he saw his platform was kind of like planting seeds too. It was like opening people's minds up to other possibilities, because like just on the healthcare thing, there's a chart on that Frank Moore for President website where he compares all the candidates at the time, Barack Obama and McCain and Clinton. And it's just funny to look at these, lengthy descriptions of their healthcare plan, and then Frank says it's free.
Frank's would be one line or one word,
and they'd go
and the others
every
would be
point,
so
and it'd be like
long
that, and like these gobbledygook things
that you gloss over.
And
Frank's was like direct.
And it seemed like it was that he was in the press enough that the platform was printed enough that political people were actually seeing it. We
got a lot of press.
Interviewed by Wiki News and The Independent and all kinds of things like that. So it was getting out there in a certain way.
And funny enough, most of the press that we got was overseas. And we were like in mainstream publications. It's all on the website. And the feedback we got was that it gave people overseas hope for the United States, in that somebody like Frank could be a serious candidate for president. Like maybe the US isn't as bad as we thought. This guy's running for president.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, we opened the exhibition on Inauguration Day, and needless to say, we were very sad that we couldn't have a proper inauguration party. I feel like we could use Frank now more than ever. But I wonder, Linda and Mikee, were all these ideas sort of on at the front of his mind? Were these the sorts of things that you think he was actively thinking about and writing about and struggling through, or where did all this
we were floored when we read his platform, because like we had our internet radio station and we had an alternative news station way before all the stuff that's going on now. It was called Lover Alternative News. And you know, we had our crew, Corey, Alexi, and Erica would be going out and recording things, and we would play it. Plus, we played a lot of shows. So
And we did a live show every Sunday night too on the internet, streaming show with lots of guests that were all political in nature.
like we had Michael Parenti, we had Black Lives Matter, Black Panther people there, a bunch of them that had written books that were people that were involved with Fred Hampton. So we were like really aware of things like on that level. But, and you know, we watched the news and like we were aware of all that stuff. But I was surprised. We were surprised when Frank typed up that platform. It was like so, you know, specific and so clear. And it wasn't that we had like talked about these things. He just like came up with it like that. But that's like the way his mind worked. He always had like stuff going on. He called it his back brain. And then he would say when he needs it, he's able to call it forth.
And he's such an iconoclast in so many ways. And he really, he sort of led with his own image in this campaign. And his face is all over it, as it is across every political campaign. And like every campaign, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. So how did you see your role in the campaign?
So it's the same as everything we did. Like the campaign really wasn't any different for us than anything else we did. Frank always said he was the front man. And then there was us, all of us, you know, but that he saw himself as just being a front man to a tribal community. And we all kind of did what we all did what we were good at doing, or what needed to be done. So from the time I first met Frank, it was always like, just like whatever needs to be done, you figure out how to do it and you learn how to do it. I was not an organized person, but you know, Frank has like these trunks of writings from when he was a kid, and then he keeps generating more stuff. So you have to like do something with it. So it was, everything's out of necessity. Mikey was a graphic designer, you know, by profession. So, you know, Frank had him do stuff, thinking
Need a poster. Okay,
make a poster, you know, and in fact, like, yeah, so it was like when, like, for example, Frank told Mikey to do a poster, and then he had him doing all this art when we first met him. Years later, we're sitting around, Frank said, when did you first realize you could draw? And Mikey said, I think it was when I did that third large piece for you. So it's like he was always like just like tapping into things. So that was what the campaign was like. We all just, like, Corey would spend his lunch on the phone with states all over the country figuring out what we had to do to be a write-in candidate. We had a ballot access expert in San Francisco, Richard Winger, that took an interest in the campaign. He was on Frank Shaman's Den show. He was available to us, so Corey would call him. Richard would be in his garage pulling out boxes, telling us exactly what we had to do and who we needed to talk to. So, you know, on the website is like, we changed so many things in so many states to make write-in candidates have an easier time of it. And then we put it all up on the website.
A lot of states didn't even know their own laws. So we were like bumping it and teaching them their own laws.
Yeah. So we all just did, you know, when we would do the festivals, Erica is a,
And, you know,
Erica,
director
what
of-
are you? Director of enrichment, you know, and at a nursing home.
activities.
Activities director. So she's good at, like, you know, setting stuff up. So she'd be involved in setting up these festivals and, like, you know, decorating. So everybody just like did what they did. And this is what we always did. Like for anything, the ritual performances, same thing. You know, we all just like did what we did. We didn't make a big distinction between things. Like when we did punk clubs for years, that really wasn't any different for us than doing ritual performances, than doing running for president. It was all the same thing. We were always the same with people. We always related the same way. It wasn't about that. It was about just like, you know, connecting with people and finding ways to do it.
Jordan, do you, maybe now's a good time to give a little tour of the of the
Sure.
show?
Yeah, we can do a
Does that
little
make sense?
interlude.
Yeah. Linda just touched on a lot of the things that relate to.
We have a nice comment here from Keith Hennessy. Part of the magic of Frank Moore's art was the tribal family aspect of it, the supportive entourage, the extended community, Linda's ease of speaking, translating, interpreting. So a lot of people on this call knew Frank or knew of Frank, and thanks Keith for that comment. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again and sort of walk you through the exhibition real quickly, if I can figure out how to do this. Oh, you know what? I'm trying to share preview and oh, here it is. Okay. Okay. So this is, can everyone see okay?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. So this is one of thousands of documentation photographs taken of the campaign. And so this is the way that the tent was set up. And just like they saved all kinds of artifacts and printed out all the emails that came in, they also saved most everything pictured here. So it wasn't that much of a jump to do this at Cushion Works. And so when we went to pick up this stuff from Corey and Erica and Alexi, it was just kind of 3 boxes, and everything was so incredibly organized. And it was really just a handover. I will also say just really quickly that they did not save quite all the bunting and things. And if you're in need for various stuff like this, Fantastico in San Francisco, which is everybody's favorite party supply store, is going out of business after 1,000,000 years. In like 2 weeks, there's an enormous sale happening. So you may want to visit Fantastico. Anyway, this is Cushion Works. And that banner is sort of the centerpiece of the campaign and is the centerpiece of the show. Each table is sort of a different chapter of the campaign. So this one is all the press that was generated. That's the hat that he wore, of course. There's a table that's modeled after the merchandise, or the swag, as they call it. There's a table that is sort of chronicles the history of their appearances and festivals and things. There's one that is all about write-in candidacy and sort of navigating a dizzying bureaucracy around that. And one is sort of fan mail and results. And then the backbone of the show really are all of the campaign ads that run on a video projection on this large wall. Most all of this gear is still available through Zazzle and Cafe Press. You can order your own Frank Moore t-shirts and mugs and magnets and things. That's what it looks like when you walk in. This monitor on the left here shows documentation of the How Berkeley Can You Be parade, which sadly they don't hold anymore. And the back wall is a slideshow of pictures that we were able to get just from the website. And then there are various archival holdings. So I just want to show you really quickly some of these. This is an article from Disability Now. This really kind of sums up the relationship between Frank two distinct bodies of Frank's work, which maybe are not distinct, but I would ask Linda and Mikee to comment. So this is an email from Frank, and it's celebrating that there's an online magazine in Germany that has profiled him. And the quote is, "Frank Moore can neither speak nor walk. He's been handicapped since birth. For the Just Makes Sense Party, he wants to transform America into small villages and establish $1,000 minimum wage. His up to 48 hours lasting ritualistic sex performances made the artist famous in the 90s." End quote. Thank you, Dietmar, for translating.
And Dietmar was the architect who our next door neighbor hired to try to get us to sign an okay for him to redo the house that he bought next door to us, and we refused to sign okay. He wanted to build this huge structure and we wouldn't let him. And so he hired Dietmar. He hired two architects. The first architect got so won over, he would send them to our house to meet us. The first architect, we ended up telling him about the movie Frank had made out of isolation. It turned out he knew a couple that had a disabled son who had institutionalized his son. And it blew him out that, and the guy died young. And he said, this is what his life could have been. What your life is his parents hadn't institutionalized him. So this is the architect he had sent over to win us over. He's like, no, they don't want to sign. He was like totally with us. And then Dietmar was a German guy who, again, you know,
He's a green architect.
A green architect. He came on the Shaman's Den. We talked to him. And then he becomes like somebody we send this to, and he just translates. So that just kind of shows you how everything was all kind of globbled together. And the neighbor who we wouldn't sign off on the house ended up driving one of the painted vans in How Berkeley Can You Be for the campaign. So it all worked out.
Got it.
We became good friends. Yeah.
Of course. I also wanted to ask you, because this does mention 48-hour ritualistic sex performances, being that Frank was mainly known, was famous or somewhat infamous, and was involved in some NEA culture war stuff around his art, you know, by comparison, the presidential campaign, as presidential campaigns often are, was a fairly buttoned up affair. And it seemed like it was important to sort of play by the rules and to do all the research and try to qualify in as many states as possible as a write-in candidate. Why do you think that was so important to the campaign, to sort of play by, to a certain extent, the campaign's rules? Or to,
well, you know? I mean, it wasn't really, I mean, you just, anything you do, you have to figure out what you have to do it. It didn't like, it was just like, okay, if this is what we got to do, we got to figure out how to do it. And so it really wasn't, I don't think we related to it as playing by the rules. And I think it was just like, what do you got to do? It's like when we publish a book, you got to figure out what you do to publish the book. It was just like kind of a tech detail, kind of how you just figure it out. And the other thing about that was Frank pointed out the way people always stop themselves from doing things because they think that it's gonna like get in the way of something they might want to do down the road. And he kept saying, nobody even relates to the fact that I do these like nude performances with erotic stuff. They don't relate to the, like, you don't have to be careful about stuff. You just do what you feel like doing. And look, he ran for president and got votes, you know, so I don't know if that answers your question.
I think it's a great answer.
Yeah.
I'll really quickly go through this and then want to hear from everybody else who have questions. Campaign event. Feel,
so
touch.
This was interesting because
the end of it.
This was at the end, and it was the first time that we combined the campaign with the erotic ritual performances. First time. And this was a British TV that wanted to cover the campaign. And so Frank does this performance, which was just our regular ritual performance, you know, but we read the platform,
They
maybe,
had the
I don't
campaign
know.
paraphernalia around.
We had all the, it was dressed up like a campaign event, but it was you know, kind of a blend, I guess.
Yeah.
And as was Frank's way, you know, he involved the crew into the performance and really put them on the spot because they wanted to be voyeurs and just like be safe out there, and he wouldn't let them do it. So he kept like, a lot of the performance was about them, pulling them in. Is there anything else about that? Yeah.
Another campaign stop here.
So that was when we went to LA, and that's Frank's running mate, Dr. Susan Block. That was the one event we did with her. And we did a couple events, I think, at Il Corral, and she introduced Frank for one of the events. And yeah, these are great videos, these LA ones, showing all these hardcore musicians. Vinny Spit was there, just like all these hardcore musicians with their Frank Moore t-shirts for president, and like, it was, you know, it was great.
Here's a slide from Frank was an artist in residence at Franklin Furnace, which was a very important space operated by Martha
Wilson.
Martha Wilson.
Actually, the Franklin Furnace was the first and only performance space in New York that would book Frank. And I think we performed there a few times over the years, but when it was just Frank and I, the first time we performed there, it was just the two of us traveling across the country. And that's when we met Annie, because someone else we knew had seen Annie and knew that we were, when they were in New York, and knew we were looking for someone because we're doing the first 5-hour performance we ever did. And we're doing it in New York, and we need a cast. And they hooked us up with Annie. We stayed at Annie's place. Well, that's like a whole story, sidebar. But that was and then after that, Martha Wilson thought that other places should book us, and she contacted places, and they wouldn't do it. And years later, we ran into, I think it was Annie that ran into somebody who booked one of the clubs, and they said that they thought that Frank was doing important work, but they're personally not comfortable with it. So they wouldn't book him at their space, but they booked him when they were on
a panel
for Cleveland, you know. So Franklin Furnace was a big deal. They were the ones that brought us back a few times, and it was a real opening for us, because once we got booked there were other spaces in other cities that would book us. So Martha was, you know, really, Martha and Harley, really important in opening stuff up for us.
Right. And for those of you who can't see because the type is a little bit small, it's a goings on sort of newsletter generated by Franklin Furnace, talking about what many of the artists who have performed there or in residence there were up to. And it's, you know, Cindy Sherman and Marina Abramovich and all kinds of people. And then it says Frank Moore, his news qualifies for write-in votes for president of the United States of America. Okay, so these are the tally. This probably doesn't come through so well for all of you, but it's tallies by different counties in the state of California, and it's dotted with 1s and 2s and 3s for Frank. And then maybe I'll just close out of here, but is say we think that he generated about 100 votes all in all, and
but Frank, he's always quick to point out that a lot of the states that we know we got votes in are states that didn't tally votes if they were under a certain amount. So we kind of felt like we would never really know what the total was, but that was the total that was
Yeah.
that was written down.
And one of the things that's really exciting about going through the material is that, Keith and I would watch a video of a campaign appearance, and then we'd find Frank's correspondence about it the next day, and it was always like, what a rollicking success it was. It just seemed like everything was a victory in such an incredible, inspiring way. So maybe right before we go to questions, I wonder if you could just talk about that a little bit.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that was really our experience most of the time. When we would do something, we would be blown out by how it went, and what we did and how people were. We were just blown out by it. And there were
like the smallness of things.
Yeah, that's the thing. Okay, so Frank was all about smallness. Like he always would talk to artists about, what a trap it was to think that you have to reach the masses to have an impact. No, he would say, you don't need to reach the masses. That's a trap. What you do is you just like stay at the level that you are at. Like we never had any money, and look at all we did without money. And so the thing that would make, like, it's kind of like that thing with the campaign where people would say, what's your platform? He goes and types it. He paid attention to the little things that I think a lot of people just brush over. Like they don't make a big deal out of it. For Frank, somebody looking at him and saying, what's your platform? He's like noticing. And enough people do that, he types a platform. And so it was always based on the little connections and the little things that happened at anything we did, walking down the street, anything we did. And so, I don't know.
Yeah.
That was there's a lot of success when you're focusing
Right, he used that
in.
as fuel, he said.
He said he used
any
it as
little
fuel.
thing, he would take it and it would just feed in, his enthusiasm, or like the fuel that would keep everything going.
Yeah, and the other thing that we realized at a certain point was the one time when we were performing in New York, and we were there for like a week, so we always would pick our favorite restaurant and just eat like 3 meals a day there, so you get to know everybody. So this one restaurant where, of course, we're giving out flyers to anybody we meet. A lot of the staff came to the performance, and it was like, probably 3, 4, 5 hour performance. I don't remember. And they left like, part way into it. And so we were like, oh my God, like, what's it going to be like now when we go to the restaurant, And we go to the restaurant and people talked about what a huge impact the performance had at the restaurant, on the relationships between the people in the restaurant, on just the way people are being. It was like a major, major thing for them. And so that's what was there for us the rest of the trip at this restaurant. And at the end of that, Frank said, you never know. Don't think you know. When somebody leaves, and then that started his rap on that. You never know, when people leave, it means they've reached some like saturation point, and you can't think that you know what that means.
So beautiful. Gosh, so inspiring. Okay, well, I think probably we should open it up to questions. You can either type it in the chat, or just maybe signal that you want to ask it, or you can, what the heck, we're friends. You can just make your voice heard. But let's open it up to the restaurant.
Oh, Joshua has a question. Hand up.
Oh.
Yes. I was curious if someone could please talk about the design of the flag that he made for his campaign, his like American flag, and like how he made that design.
Yeah, so Frank did that when the Iraq War started. He did a whole series of art at that period. He had done when he was like a teenager, he had done a series of Hell to War paintings. And he kind of redid them so that we could put them out in our windows and on our front yard. And then he just did the flag, you know, as part of that series that we blew up. We had it in our front yard, we had it in our window, we gave it out to people, and it was just Frank, you know,
Peace flag.
just we called it the peace flag.
How did he design it? Like the
Well,
dot.
Frank, you know, the thing is, Frank didn't like, he just did shit. So it wasn't like he designed anything. It was like, it was a digital
Yeah,
thing.
Paint Shop Pro.
Paint Shop Pro.
And he
So-
just taught himself how to do it, and then he just did it. Yeah.
He just did
It's just like he would write. He just sat down and he'd just do it. He'd figure out the control. Yeah, Frank was really good at figuring out keyboard shortcuts and like just how to use a computer. He was really amazing at that because he was typing with his head, so he had to control the mouse and everything with his pointer. So, but he would figure out the shortest way to do something for the maximum effect.
And then that was kind of the beginning of his digital art thing. And then he did a whole bunch of other digital art after that.
Great. Anyone else?
Well, hi, this is Dawn. Hi.
Hi, Dawn.
Can you hear me? Hey. Well, I just think this is so exciting and so wonderful, and I gosh, like that platform is totally a platform I would vote for. So I'm like, oh my goodness, like we need Frank more than ever in some ways. You know, I'm kind of blown away by that. I'm curious, like, what was his reaction to people responding to the platform and to responding to doing this when you were out and about?
It's like everything else. He just would be blown out. You know, he would be blown out by the whole thing. He just thought it was amazing. I mean, maybe that's part of why he called it the best performance, because it, like, you know, what? We're running for president now, you know, and it would just blow us out. Because I mean, what the place that people went to when they read that platform, we were just
look at the platform, and then they like kind of all things would change, and they look at Frank again, and they just start reading and keep reading, and then
they kept looking back up at
I
Frank.
vote for you.
And then they go like as if they were surprised. I would vote for you. You know, so I mean, I think, you know, he was just blown out. We were all blown out, you know. We just enjoyed it, but we were blown out. Yeah.
And connected to that, was there? Of course. I mean, that just makes me happy to hear that he was surprised that you were, you know, that it was exciting. Was there a different response when it was like the erotic performance with the presidential campaign, like combined, like that? That just sounds amazing to me, honestly.
Well, yeah, it really is a different audience. You know, the people that came to the ritual performances were different for the most part, with some overlap, than the people that would come when we were doing punk clubs, you know, to people that would come to the poetry readings. Like when we were doing poetry stuff, most of those poets never came to a ritual performance. So we were like active in so many subcultures. Frank would always brag about how many subcultures we had moved through and freaked out. Because like at the beginning of coming into a subculture, people would think Frank was like the cat's meow. Oh, what an amazing guy. And then like Frank being Frank, he would just like, he wouldn't hold back. He didn't play games. He was just like straight like this. And inevitably, people would be uncomfortable. And then by the end of it, like, you know, he was kind of like, you know, nobody wanted to, he was like a bad guy or something. So we moved through so many subcultures like that. But the audience was typically different. It was just a different group of people. Most people that would come to like a ritual performance didn't know anything about the other stuff we did. And for any of that, for the most part. Not that we were hiding it, but they were just interested in that aspect.
We've got a couple questions in the chat, and we also have a campaign slogan, which I guess is a little bit late, but it's a good one. Frank more than ever. That's directly from Ukiah.
Yeah, that's great.
Culture for that.
Yeah.
Ruby Goldberg, our friend and artist, has a question. She'd love to know what brought Frank the most joy, and how did he speak about physical pain?
Well, I think, you know, our life was really about our commitment to each other. That was like, all the other stuff was just like what we did. It was only about our connection with each other. I hated art. I hated poetry when I met Frank. I just, you know, but it's like, it wasn't about any of that. It was about like, you know, when I met Frank, he, you know, he always says he's flexible. So he would be into whatever, like at the time I met him. What?
How did you meet her?
Okay, so I had moved here from Philadelphia, and I was like in my early 20s. I was 23 when I met Frank, but and I had lived in Berkeley for a year, and I had moved here because I was clear that all of the options that were laid out in front of me, I wasn't interested in. You know, you could have boyfriends, you could have a job, you could get married, it just it didn't ring true to me. And so I moved out here. I was kind of part of some growth movement thing, which I quickly left because that seemed full of shit. And I just got a job at a travel agency. And it was one of those things where I had worked as a travel agent with my neighbor. So I kind of could say I did it, but I didn't know anything. A woman gave me a job, figured out pretty quick I didn't know what I was doing, and she just kept me anyway. And ended up being in a performance years later. She played the victim in our rock and roll show. But so Frank came in, and so my state of mind was, I have a sense that there's more, and I just have to hang out and wait until I see it. So in wheels Frank, in his wheelchair, driving himself, and I'm thinking, I hope this guy doesn't come up to me. And he comes straight up to me, and he's asking about airline tickets. And I had to lean. I was at like a high counter to read his board, never wore a bra. And he said he could see down my shirt. And so he said, you'd be great in this play I'm doing. And I was like, oh, you know, but, you know, the thing about Frank was, first of all, there was no play, but he said later he would be willing to create one if he needed to, but he didn't need to for me. And the other thing was, the second I had like contact with Frank, I saw Frank, and I actually knew that this was it. This is what I've been waiting for. And that if I didn't follow it, I was full of shit. And so following it means talking to this guy that looks like Frank, who is married to 3 other people and 2 kids. You know, it's like, but, you know, I knew I had to do it. You know, I wasn't going to be full of shit. So he said, give me your phone number and my wife will call you. I said, oh, he has a wife. So how bad could it be? And the first time I met Frank, they had like a little 2-bedroom apartment. And one of the bedrooms was Frank's, like where he painted. He did big oil paintings where he had trunks of his writings. He had me pull out his binder where he talked about life and relationships and how life works. And it was like, made so much sense to me. And that was about how when you meet somebody who's willing to be in a deep relationship with you, that you are willing to. And like, you don't have a picture of Mr. Right or Ms. Right. It's just, this person is willing to go to a deep place with me. And then the commitment is to not walk out. to hang in when it gets rough, to push each other for what you need, to be open. And I just went with that. And so that, like in the first, I don't know, 3, 4 years, I felt like I was just upside down and sideways. I didn't know anything about anything. Frank would say at a workshop, break taboos. I said, what the hell is a taboo? You know, I didn't even know what that meant. So it was like, so all that's to say that everything else we did came out of that. It was like it was always about us just being together and deeply being together. So there was never anything about the campaign or the performance or the whatever, because it was just us doing stuff. And that's always what was real. And so that was like the way Frank talked about it, it gave people a place to fall into. So people that were willing to fall into that, like at performances or with students that he worked with over the years, they could fall into our relationship. And that would be like, everything went from there. So.
Amazing.
And then about physical pain, you know, the whole thing with Frank was, you know, everything was like so earth. It was so earth. So it's like, you know, it was all body. So if something hurt, it was like we were involved in it. It was all of us. It's just like you dealt with stuff. And I don't know if physical pain, I mean, I think Frank was just like anybody else. He just happened to be spastic. You know, but you know, he had the same kind of aches and pains that the rest of us have. It wasn't anything special.
I want to acknowledge that I got major ambulances, speaking of.
Oh, wow.
It's 6 minutes past the hour. If people want to jump off, I want to give them a chance to do that, and I want to thank them for being here. I do want to honor that there is one question in the queue, so if you want to stick around, by all means, stick. And also Apsara, our friend Apsara, and just noted that you can see Frank's paintings in a Matrix show in 2022 at BAM PFA that Keith Wilson and Vincent Fecteau are co-curating. Frank's paintings, like Life is Life, were singular, very, very, very amazing. So we look forward to the museum reopening.
And that painting, the whole BAMFA thing is thanks to Larry Rinder. We after Frank died, it's like we had all this stuff, you know, and we didn't know anything about anything. And so we just like started contacting places we thought might have an interest in paintings. And he came over to the house, and I mean, we didn't really know anything. It was like, well, do you take them all? You know, he had to explain, no, you know. And he gave us other places to contact, but he took 2 of Frank's paintings, and it was, you know, it was amazing to us. Thank you, Larry. It was really amazing to us. It made, you know, to get Frank's paint, knowing that whatever happened to us and the rest of his paintings, that there were 2 of Frank's paintings that were out there for people to see what he did. So that's where that came from.
Lots of really nice comments coming in. The final question that we have, and again, if you're signing off, thanks so much for being here, and you're welcome to come see the show. Book an appointment to come see the show. Our friends at Elsewhere, a dynamic art space in Greensboro, North Carolina, ask, how did you 3 care for each other, balancing roles, balancing public and private? And you've woven in and around that, but that's.
Yeah, Frank came up with a thing calling one body, you know, that we function as one body, and that like is totally true. You know, it was like, you know, because Frank was in a wheelchair, you know, I fed him, I bathed him, I wiped his butt, you know, everything. And then Mikee kind of melted into that. So then it was the 3 of us. And I don't know. I mean, it was just very, the thing about Frank was like he was just so like down to earth. It was just so,
Everything was just mundane. It was
It
just
was
like,
all
making
mundane.
meals and showering and bathing and
But it
watching
was
TV while
full
we're eating
of-
dinner.
but the like we experienced it as amazing. So it wasn't like this is just what you got to do. Like, everything was
Right, and there wasn't a public private. It was all
no.
it's all open.
No, Frank had
We had a cam going in our house, which we still,
We still
24
do.
hours a day.
yeah.
Frank just wanted everything out there.
And he had said that he had thought about making his death a public event. And in some ways it kind of was, because right when he was ready to die, he didn't want to go to a hospital, and I was kind of freaking out. And so I said, Frank, I have to sit here and watch you not breathe, And so he said, for you, I'll go. And so here we go, me like totally not thinking he's going to die. And we go to this hospital, and all the people there knew us because we had lived in the ICU for 6 weeks, 3 years earlier than that. So, and some of the doctors had Frank's books and had read his book. The guy who was our doctor when Frank died had read Frank's books. So, but the thing was, all of a sudden we were in a public space and we were surrounded by all these people that knew us. So the whole death process was public. And our friend, Rich Kerbaves, who was Frank's ear, nose, and throat doctor, was on the Shaman's Den many times. He told us afterward that we had a huge impact on the staff at the hospital. Because it was the 5 of us. It was Mikee and I and Erica and Corey and Alexi. And we just sat with Frank all night as, he slowly passed away, touching him and talking to him. And it was like a very intimate thing. So Frank did end up dying publicly, and
The nurses.
oh, well, that right. So at the last kind of Frank activity was the doctor who was like going crazy that Frank wanted to just die rather than be hooked up to all this stuff, was calling Rich Kerbaves to have him talk us into it. And so I had to hear Rich Kerbaves come up with some possible options Frank might go for. And then I have to go back into the room where Frank is with this nurse to ask Frank if he's willing to do this. And the nurse who was with him walks out, and she's all kind of like rosy and smiling. And she goes, he talked to me, like as if like, that was like something. And I went in and I said, Frank, you're
Flirting with
you're flirting with the nurse. And, he just like smiled. But so public, private, it was all like the same thing. Was that the question? Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I hate.
No, he wasn't he was a Cancer, and he had Gemini rising and Taurus moon, but he did have Leo. I always said that Frank had a generous spirit because he never judged anybody. He was always like this with people. He would say things to people and I would think, oh no, like how could you? And people would always respond. Like he'd say things I would never think you can say to someone who looks like that or seems that way. And people would always just come right down there with him. So yeah, generous spirit.
Great.
Wow.
Yeah.
So much here. It's like for a Tuesday night. My God.
You can see why the performances were 3 to 5 hours. Frank would always say after 3 hours, we're just getting started.
Yeah. Yeah. Something feels wrong just about ending this event at all. It's so moving and singular and amazing. And I'm glad we've recorded it, and just can't thank you enough Linda and Mikee and folks at the Blue House for making the show possible and making this event possible, and Keith for being the driving influence behind the installation. And it's such a nice warm feeling. Who knew Zoom could do it?
Frank could do it. He could. That's like he got when the internet first started. Frank, of course, was there like during the bulletin board period, and people gave him shit. You know, they said, Frank, you're all about intimacy and physical stuff, and you're doing stuff on the computer. But Frank had a way of turning everything into this, and the email community that Frank started at the very, very, very beginning of email and internet is still going. So, you know, he always found a way. He never like kind of went that way. He always brought things here.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Friends near and far, friends old and new, maybe.
Yay.
Can we unmute?
Everyone.
I just want to like just hear everybody.
Woo!
Yay!
Yeah.
And you know, the other thing Frank said about applause, when people would applaud at the end of a performance, he'd say, no. He said that makes it seem like it's ending. It doesn't end. You know, it just carries on into your life. It doesn't stop here.
We'll edit the applause out of the Zoom.
Well said.
Okay.
You can, all the videos are up there. You know, there's like pretty amazing stuff if you want to see Frank in action.
Indeed, I can vouch for that. Okay, thanks again, gang.
Thank you.
See you
Thank you.
here,
Bye,
Cushman Works
everybody.
or beyond.
Bye.